Hello, everyone. Welcome to Libraries in Response, session 142, 42, in our nearly 6-year running series since we started at the beginning of the pandemic. And we are we're happy to have you all back, or for the first time, because we always get some number of people who haven't been with us before. And that's great. I was just talking before we started the recording that we've had more people checking out the recordings. We have Libraries of Response has its own YouTube channel where these recordings, today included, are posted. They're all there, waiting for you if you're interested in. We've had nearly 23,000 views of these 1-hour sessions, which is roughly double, at least for the last couple of years, it's been roughly double the people that registered for the actual live events. So we don't really track people like that. So it's some combination of people who are want to review it again, because a lot of times the information is pretty dense and a lot of detail, or they just missed it, which is also common, and they want to catch it later. So that's great. Let that roll off. So here we are, back with we've got this kind of illustration here of cable and satellite, which is kind of the topic of general conversation about what's the best way to deliver broadband. So my name is Don Means. I'm the director of the Gigabit Libraries Network. We're an open consortium of what we think are innovative libraries anywhere, doing fascinating things with their positions as this remarkable institution. Co-producer is the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, based in The Hague, a longtime partner in connectivity and our campaign for universal public access. It means that everyone should be proximate to a community access point, ideally a library. And that's the best we can do. Our speaker today is Doug Dawson, who's back again, I believe, for the third time to help us understand what's going on, especially with the BEAD program. Doug has been tracking this stuff forever, even long before there was BEAD, and a lot of broadband issues that have been facing the country and since the 90s. First, we need to thank our sponsors, the New Jersey, Texas, Washington, and Delaware state libraries, as well as Mission Telecom, our sole commercial sponsor, who we appreciate, and IFLA itself, which has joined the sponsors. We appreciate all of these sponsors. It makes it possible. And if anyone is interested in joining this august group, check in with me, let me know. We really appreciate it. This is our kind of our go-to image for what Libraries of Response is about, and that's how libraries are dealing with various crises. These are large-scale crises illustrated here. Crises come in every scale, of course. They're global, like these. They're regional. They're personal. And libraries respond to all of those. People walk through the door, or the communities are dealing with these things. Of course, we started with the pandemic. That's kind of quieted down for the moment, but it's lurking, and we now have learned that it can raise its head at any time. Of course, climate is the big kahuna of crises. It's just kind of trumps everything else. AI has been a particular focus for us. Actually, it's been our most popular topic for the last, 4 years since we've been doing sessions related to AI. And that's continues to be a challenge as people are trying to grasp what it's about. It's our opinion that libraries have a special place in this context. They're different from all the other sort of application institutions, health and commercial, everything else has AI applied to it. It's not, none of these institutions are about information technology and this massive change in information technology. Libraries are ideally suited to play that role. We actually believe that libraries are essential, will be essential to delivering AI to the public. It's just we're running into these limits. Who do you trust? Who do you believe? How do you learn about it? How do you discuss it? Who do you discuss it with? All of these questions the libraries can provide a response to. The fourth of these four horsemen here is war, which we really didn't have on our screen until, till recently. And it is just risen its ugly head once again to impinge on society. We will have in the new year uh, a presentation from Bibliothèque Sans Frontières, the French-based group that parachutes into areas of distress, war zones, refugee camps, and set up libraries, both, of course, online as well as offline. An interesting strategy on how to create connectivity asynchronously. That's next month. So libraries grounded the principle that informed, educated citizenry is key to a free society. It just needs restating. We're so in agreement with this, and ever more so. We are going to take a break for the holidays. This is the last one we're going to do this year, and then we'll be back in January. We're going to start with the Institute for Self-Reliance. Chris Mitchell will be here talking about community networks and how libraries sit at the heart of those ventures. And then, as I mentioned, BSF will talk about their work in Eastern Europe, in Syria, Ukraine, Guyana, and all their different strategies for connectivity and building a community around, well, a library. And then we have Vint Cerf returning in later January to review his recent article on the 7 stages of the internet. So who better and Vint, it's great to have Vint back for, I guess, the third time. And then we're developing programs for this library diplomacy. We think it's a really fascinating area it's a branch of citizen diplomacy where libraries worldwide share practices and even relationships, exchanges, and so forth. And then library architecture, the design of a modern library. What does that look like in today's world and tomorrow's world? So we've had that on before. Really fascinating topic. Anyway, let's get to Doug. So I am going to stop share. I'm going to welcome Doug. Welcome Doug back to Libraries in Response to give us an update on the BEAD program. We this is a kind of fascinating story. It's both an infrastructure story. Well, it is an infrastructure story. It's also a political story about infrastructure and how difficult it is to do infrastructure because you have to commit large amounts of money up front. And so it looks like you're spending money, but nothing's happening because that's the way infrastructure is. It takes a long time. And this has just been a fascinating project where NTIA, the federal agency for communications, set up general criteria that each state would create its own plan. And we did have the fellow that was responsible for wrangling all those states into submitting a plan for funding of this $42 billion, which is just the latest round of billions of dollars to close the digital divide. The digital divide, just to drop back a bit, it was there from the beginning. So in the 90s, the web arrived. Everybody in urban areas and technology, just a little bit hip, got excited about it. It transformed the economy. It liberated hundreds of billions of dollars out of the economy from the efficiency of document exchanges to begin with. That it flattened out the communication standards and allowed businesses to kind of dispense with their fax machines and manual entry that creates all these errors and problems. And so it's just a huge deal, right? From the 90s. And that's just rolled on. But not everybody was connected. And where I am, just north of San Francisco, is a suburban rural county. And it's fairly well-to-do, but we weren't getting broadband. And we go, why not? I mean, it's a new telecommunication service. Everybody gets it, right? No, that's not right. The carriers said, no, that's not who we are now. We're just technology companies. We're just businesses, and we'll invest where we can expect a return. And you're actually a second-tier market. We were stunned to learn we were a market. We thought everybody was a market, the market, like telephone and electricity. Well, no, that principle of universal service, which is if a service is essential, then everyone should have affordable access to it. That just didn't happen. From that point on, it was market forces deciding where they would stop deploying. And that's just where their return expectations stopped, and then they just stopped. And there was no public intervention, which is basically how it happens, is that the public sector, to assure universal service, extracts funds from the profitable markets, which are dense and urban, and subsidizes the less profitable ones, which are typically rural and where people live farther apart, they're more expensive, and they tend to have less money. So without that intervention, it just dragged on, and we've had a persistent gap in the number of communities and people that have not had access to the broadband, and they've been angry about that for good reason. The kids will all leave, no companies will move in, and their towns are drying up. So people are angry about that. They feel like they've been dismissed and neglected, and there's a justification for that. So they'll do anything. They're desperate. They'll vote for anyone, as we've seen. So enough of that diatribe. Welcome, Doug. Tell us what's actually going on today with the BEAD program and how it's changed course and where it's going to go next.
Well, thank you, Don. I think the last time I was here was early summer, and I suggested that we get back together. By the end of the year, we should know everything. Turns out we don't know everything, but we know a heck of a lot more. So I've prepared a real simple PowerPoint just to keep me on track more than anything here. So really, let's talk about. Let's start with the little bit history. This will be very quick. Way back in 2021, which feels like ancient history, this program got started with the $42 billion grant program. It was going to be administered by NTIA, but the concept at the time was that the states would have a lot of leeway to do things their way, and NTIA was sort of the big overall arching administrator. And so that's how we got started. It took a long time to get started. I mean, state broadband offices and NTIA took all of 22 to ramp up to get going. A whole lot of states didn't even have a broadband office. NTIA went out and hired a lot of staff. They didn't really have anybody ready to tackle this. They didn't release the NOFA, which is the rules, until May of 2022. The clock is ticking. Then there was this big, terrible, long delay because we were waiting for passable FCC broadband maps, and so that didn't really happen until 2023. And in June of 2023, NTIA finally said, "Here's how much money each state's going to get." So we had basically a 1-year delay waiting for those darn maps, and it's unfortunate that they were built into the congressional rules. Most states already thought they had good maps, and so they were ready to go marching ahead and give the money out based upon their own maps, but they weren't allowed to do that. Not in August of 23, states had to release a 5-year plan, and they had to do that before they could do anything else more serious. And then they were supposed to have their initial proposals to NTIA by the end of 2023. Proposals being how they're going to make it work. Here's how we're going to score grants. Here's how we're going to pick winners. Here's how we're going to divvy up the map, all those kind of rules. And so now all of a sudden we're at the end of 2023, still not close to giving anybody any money out. So then in 2024, a map challenge went on. And so because the original maps, the original BEAD list had 14 million locations, and we knew a lot of those were not good. And so the map challenge was to try to get the maps in better shape. A lot of counties, including libraries, were involved in this. A lot of counties got involved with trying to get their county map right. So people put a whole lot of work into this. And I'll talk more about that process in a later slide. States finally started making preliminary grant awards near the end of 2024. There was 3 states before Christmas last year who actually said, "Here's who we want to give the money to," and then the new administration took over, and early they put everything on hold, and then in June of this year they came out with a whole new set of rules and basically completely restructured the program. Honestly, threw away 90% of the old stuff that had been done with a new streamlined set of rules. And now where we're at is all the states have made their actual applications to the NTIA of who they want to give the money to, except California. Yesterday, California came out with their list of who they want to give the money to, but they have to put it out for public comment. So I think it goes to NTIA by January the 9th is the date I thought I saw yesterday. But so at that point, they will all be in. They're all in now except for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. I don't know that the U.S. Virgin Islands actually has any BEAD eligible locations, and I'm not sure why Puerto Rico is being so late, but because they do have some of them. But all the other states are in. Actually, as of I prepared this slide for yesterday, and as of yesterday, there were 20 states that NTIA had tentatively approved, and now today it's 29. So it's clicking forward. So the NTIA has actually looked at these proposals and told those 29 states that they can start moving forward to make grant awards. So that's kind of where we're at. Now we'll get a little more detail here. So what's left, obviously, the NTIA has to keep reviewing and get the rest of the states done. States have to make additional certifications, which I'll talk about in the next slide. After all of that's done, states then have to negotiate with everyone they want to give an award to. And there's going to be problems there because we know that there's folks who got these awards who don't actually have their financing lined up. So in order to get your contract signed, you actually have to show proof that you have money in the bank or you have a line of credit that's ironclad and you have to be able to spend it. Somebody has to have an approved letter of credit, which is sort of an insurance policy that comes in and pays for it if the ISP walks away from the project. And so that'll be the next step. A lot of companies and the winners do, but there's still quite a few of the smaller guys who are going to struggle with those things. There's also then the other next slide will talk about a bunch of other literal rules that'll sort of get in the way there. And then finally, once a given grantee makes it through that process and they get a signed contract, then they can start construction. And you would think that that means they run out and start building stuff, but they actually don't. But first, they have to do environmental studies. They have to get permitting in right-of-ways. They have to buy equipment that meets the Build America, Buy America rules. So, it's still going to take folks a while before anybody's out laying fiber anywhere. But the process will start the day that they get that all done. The NTIA is still coming out with new rules, and we don't think they're finished yet. So just very recently, they said that anybody who agrees to take a BEAD award has to promise they will never, ever take any additional federal subsidies or grants for those same locations. That troubles some of the small telephone companies who take these awards, because they receive subsidy funding through the Universal Service Fund in general, and they're very worried that that's going to interfere with that. And if it does, if they get the legal opinion that it does, some of them may just turn down their BEAD grant and not take it after all. So that that's a troublesome sort of guarantee. It's not that much of a trouble to say I won't take more grant for it. Once it's been built, it's been built. So that I don't think anyone has trouble with that. They're really kind of worried about these truly remote rural subsidies that are already out there from the Universal Service Fund. States have to get certified that they will not implement net neutrality or any form of price regulation. There are, 5 or 6 states who have state net neutrality rules. For anyone who forgets, that's been a while, but net neutrality basically made ISPs promise to not do things that gave some people unfair advantage in accessing the web. That's the simplest way to describe it. The fact is, there's almost no ISP in the country who could break net neutrality. I mean, most of the winners in here don't have the ability to really disrupt the web, even if they wanted to. So, but the fact is, those states are going to somehow have to agree not to implement those laws. And a state broadband office doesn't really have the ability to do that. Those were passed by a legislature. And so I'm not quite sure how those handful of states are going to deal with that. There's also a handful of states like New York who have price regulations. What NTIA is saying is that if a BEAD winner, first off, the price regulations don't apply to BEAD. And I don't think anybody's too upset about that. But what they said is that also applies to that ISP statewide. And so if you go to New York, where Comcast and Charter actually is the biggest winner in New York. Charter won a whole lot of BEAD in New York. And if they got a small BEAD grant, that would mean that they're off the hook for price regulation for the whole state, and possibly for as long as 10 years. We don't really know how that works yet, but it would probably be for a very long time. This is sort of an end run of the NTIA trying to kill state price regulation. The odd thing about the rule is, if there's an ISP in that state who that price regulation applies to who didn't win BEAD, they wouldn't be off the hook. It's going to be a very odd sort of checkerboard of regulations. I expect some of those states, there's not many who have that, but New York may fight them over that, and it may come to the point where they'll cancel their awards to folks who they think should be under price regulation. There's going to be a battle over that one, I'm pretty sure, unless the state just gives in on it. States also have to certify that they've established a process for fast permitting and pole attachments. And again, broadband offices have no ability to do that. I mean, this has actually been part of the original BEAD rules since 2021, and maybe a third of the states have done a little bit in this area, but most states really have not, because that's just not the kind of thing. About half of the states comply with FCC pole attachment rules, and so they just assume they don't have to do anything because the FCC rules are supposedly the solution to that. Turns out they are not, but and then the states that have their own, some of them have not made any updates, some of them are very far behind in making the updates they need to make to do this. The real issue, though, is going to be permitting. This just sort of reared its ugly head maybe in the last month or 6 weeks, and the federal government is, I think this is either 4 fourth or fifth attempt to make it easy to get permits on federal land. They've failed all the last 4 or 5 times, but they're going to apparently try again now and say, thou shalt be able to get a permit quickly when you have to cross a national park or whatever. Every time they've tried that, it simply didn't happen. The rule from on top never filtered down to the folks at the park, and it just never has happened. But now they're talking about making that apply to everything, that states have to somehow make it easier for all of their right-of-ways to be that easy. And quite honestly, if we want to talk, we talk about states having different approaches to doing things. Permitting is so unique to every state. Nobody does it the same. Some places it's completely under the purview of the state roads department, and other states it's somewhere else. Some of these states, the people who give out the permits have a little empire, and it's the most bureaucratic mess you've ever seen in your life. Other states, it's easy. I mean, it's so amazingly different. And then, of course, states only regulate right-of-ways on state roads, which are a pretty small percentage of roads. So BEAD's going into places where they're not going to be state roads. And of course, we don't know how the heck this is going to filter down to that level. I personally think that permitting issue is going to cause all sorts of headaches, because I think that the state, even though NTIA has told these 29 states to go ahead, I think they're going to have to make this certification before they can actually give anybody the money. And so I think a lot of those 29 states, and the 29 will quickly turn to 49. I mean, California is going to be 2 months behind everybody else, but it's going to catch up and have them all there. But just getting your first approval of your grant awards is not the final process, because the states are going to have to come back and make these certifications. And a lot of them, they may have already done that in what they told NTIA, but quite honestly, the grant offices are not authorized to make those certifications. They can't really represent the state highway department. I mean, that's just not part of their job title, right? So this is liable to be a very sticky issue before we're done here. There's also a very strong rumor, and in fact, it was included in a draft of an executive order that by the time that executive order was issued, it was no longer in there. But there's a strong rumor that NTIA are going to make states guarantee that that anyone who wins the award will not have an AI regulation. Oh, no, I said that wrong. States that have AI regulations may not receive BEAD awards, and so that's what the rumor is. The executive order that didn't get published said that would kill non-deployment funds, which I'll talk about in a little while. But I don't think that issue is dead yet. It turns out that there's only 3 states that have done absolutely nothing yet with AI regulations. So pretty much every state has those. Most of the regulations that are out there are to say things like, you can't cheat somebody with AI. They just are adding that to the same regulations that say you can't cheat people by email or by phone calls. So they've done a lot of that kind of criminal sort of regulations of AI to add them to the list of other things that you can't do bad to people. Some of the other states have passed some preliminary privacy rules related to AI. That's going to be if they try to invoke this at all, this is going to be a major fight. And I know you've had a bunch of sessions about AI, and AI regulation is a complete jumble right now. And so I think if they do this, this will be the first step of the federal government trying to take over AI regulation and keep states out of it. And states are going to have a lot of problem with that, because unless the federal government does it right, some of those things like privacy and using AI for criminal purposes may not get covered, and that's not going to work for states. So states will have 6 months to make these certifications from the day that they got that approval. So those approvals I just talked about, 9 happened yesterday. States are going to have 6 months to make these approvals that are on the screen here. And so until they make those certifications, I don't believe they can give anybody their money. We're not sure yet. Everyone's sitting here going, great, they've just told Louisiana that their stuff is awarded. They're going to start building right away. I don't believe that's going to happen yet. I don't think we're there. I believe that they're going to have to go through this process. Now, there may be some states that just jump through and the governor signs an executive order saying that they'll make all the stuff work and they're done. So, I mean, who knows, right? but there's going to be states who have real problems with some of these things. So that's the next big hurdle. And unfortunately, none of us know how this is going to work yet. The states don't. I've talked to several states this week, and they just have big question marks. They'd like, we don't know what's next. So they know that they have this 6-month deadline, but they don't really know how this is going to end up being implemented yet. And we don't know that the full list of things that they're going to be asked to certify to is finished yet. They could easily still add the AI to it as an example. So that the restructuring that happened in June was called the benefit of the bargain round of BEAD. And essentially, I told you before, every state had come up with this scoring matrix of how they were going to pick winners. And states took very different approaches in that. Before this session started, Don and I were talking about that. I mean, states had a lot of different opinions on what they wanted to stress in their state, what they thought was important. Did they care about technology? Did they care about affordability? Whatever. Every state had a list of things that was higher up on their list of things they wanted to take care of. And those all got thrown out with the benefit of the bargain round. So the states no longer could use their original scoring matrix to pick winners. And under the benefit of the bargain round, what they had to do was states had to go through and decide first which technologies they were going to qualify as being able to have a priority. And so everybody said fiber is a priority. Every state said that, HFC, cable system networks have a priority. States differed and had a lot of internal turmoil about whether they wanted to say fixed wireless would get a priority or whether satellite would get a priority. And so states differed on how they picked that. But once they made that, and of course, what was amazing remember the 4-year timeline just to get us up to here? States were given like several weeks to make these determinations. All of a sudden, we're going very fast, right? And so they went and made their determinations. Once they did that, then what the benefit of the bargain round said was, if in a given location, if somebody wants to put in a priority technology like fiber, then they win first. And if there isn't somebody like that who wants a priority, if somebody doesn't want to do fiber, then it goes to the lower technologies. It automatically goes to fixed wireless or satellite if the state made those not priority. Some states actually did make fixed wireless a priority. So I mean, the states had a little different opinion on those things. And then the states, and in doing this, remember I said there was already some states who had picked winners. They had to start all over again. So they had to go back and they didn't ask for new grant awards, but they went back and rescored them under these new rules to pick new winners. As they started doing that, NTIA came out and said, wait a minute, we also want to put price caps in here because we think the states are going to award a lot of very expensive fiber under these rules. So even after those states had already begun to do that, a few of them had made preliminary awards under the new bargain of the benefit of the bargain rules. They came back and made the states apply these price caps. The price caps were determined state by state upon a cost model that said, here's what it should cost to build fiber in Nebraska or whatever, right? Those kind of cost models are notoriously unreliable. They have nothing to do with local circumstances. There can be two neighborhoods, a mile apart where one of them has really good poles and one of them has poles that are all falling down. And it could literally be twice as expensive to build where the poles are bad. And so those cost models are not a good predictor of what the real life situation is to build. But they came back with these threshold numbers. So they said, most of the states have never told the public what their thresholds are, but we can look at their awards and sort of guess. But they look to be between 6,000 and 12,000 depending on the state. And so anyone who had an award higher than that, even with a priority project like fiber, had to come back and either accept that lower amount or drop out. And many of them did drop out. Many of them said, well, I can't take that lower amount. Some of them did take the lower amount. And some of them were already under that threshold. I mean, this didn't lower everybody, but it lowered some people. So, so we had, pardon me. I'm fighting off a cold, so I apologize for the periodic coughing. So this has been a very, the last 3 or 4 months have just been complete turmoil in the industry because states had almost all already judged their grants under their own rules. Then they had to come back and judge them under the benefit of the bargain rules. And ones who had already gotten that done had to come back and judge them again based upon the cost caps. And all during that same time, NTIA has been whacking away at the number of passings. They keep eliminating locations which they say are not grant eligible, and that's one way to get the size of the grant program down, is to get rid of locations where BEAD goes. So the universe has dropped fairly significantly. So it's just right now. I think you can, if you know a state broadband manager, buy them a drink, because that has been the worst job in America for the last 6 months. Those poor folks were put through it, I tell you. Now, what's happened now that California released their numbers, about half of the money, or a little bit more than half of the money, has now been assigned to BEAD winners. Now, that's not final yet, because again, the money's not final until they actually get contracts with all those winners. Some of them will not make it through the contract. Some of them will refuse to sign it. Some of them will be unable to sign it because they don't have their financing lined up. And so we don't know what's going to happen to those. Do they get reassigned to a lower technology? Do they just fall on the floor? If they're already a lower technology and no one else wants that, do those people just not get broadband? We don't know what happens when people fail to sign their contract. But every grant program we've ever had, state or federal, there are always winners who turn out to, by the time they go to sign the contract, they back out of it. It happens in every grant program I've ever worked with. So there will be some folks who cannot make it through that process. So right now there's about 21.3 billion that has not, out of the 45 billion, that was not allocated to BEAD, which is just a hair over half, right? And that's called non-deployment funds. The original rules from the actual legislation, the IIJA, said whatever states don't spend on infrastructure, they get as non-deployment funds. And it gave a long list of the kind of things they could do with that. And I don't know if I didn't put them in here. So that they were able to use them to do things like they could do a state cybersecurity plan to make all the ISPs safer. They could do a whole lot of work on these pole attachments we talked about. They could put money into wiring rural or urban low-income housing locations with fiber, so with some sort of wiring. So they had a long list of ways they could use this money. One that really would have benefited libraries was they could have used that money for digital inclusion, meaning it could be used to train people. I'll actually have it here. There's the bullet point. They could train people. They could buy computers for people. They could have, first it was digital skills training to teach people how to use the computers. They also could have had programs where they train technicians to be technicians. So that sort of thing. Could be used for telehealth. And so right now it looks like the NTIA does not want to disperse any of that 21 billion. For the last 6 months, they've been talking about this $20 billion, which is now 21 billion, as cost savings that goes back to the Treasury. And so there's a whole lot of places where they've made those statements. They've never made any official announcements, but so that has now crept its way up to the Capitol Hill, and there are some folks actually from both parties. There's a whole lot of red state governors saying, "I want my money." There's a whole lot of people in the House of Representatives are saying, "Hey, our state wants this money," because that's a whole lot of money, 21 billion. And so that's going to be the next big fight. Does that money ever get dispersed? A lot of that money would have gone to libraries. I mean, that was the digital training and the computers and all those sort of things that libraries are probably the biggest purveyor of already today. I mean, that's something that there's a whole lot of new organizations who are cranking up to get into the digital equity business, but libraries have already been doing those things for many, many years, and a lot of them had already had plans to use this money. I mean, they already knew that this stuff was coming, and they had very big plans to step up their programs, lend out hotspots, give more computers, lend out laptops, all those kind of things that libraries do to help people. And so that looks like that's probably dead, but we don't know for a fact. My bet would be somebody, if they finally come out and say that it's not going to be distributed, that there will be states who will sue over it. And then I don't know what that means. It means we'll decide it 3 years from now, I guess. So, but that's a giant. I mean, half of the money now is not being dispersed. So the 45 million turned into 20 to 21 billion that's actually being spent on infrastructure. And let's talk about where it went here. This was before California, and it just got approved yesterday, and I have not been able to break their awards down in terms of technology yet. So this is still short for their passings. But it's still, the good news here is there's still a heck of a lot of fiber being built. So, you hear, the press makes it sound really negative, because originally it was probably going to go 90% fiber. Well, it's still 64% fiber. California went pretty heavily to fiber, so that's probably going to bump it up. My quick look yesterday is it might even bump it up to closer to 70%. So an awful lot of fiber is going to be built. Quite a surprisingly amount of fixed wireless. Satellite is the big surprise. Under the original rules, states were going to give money to satellite. Every state acknowledged that there's locations that it makes no sense to build infrastructure to. But it was not going to be anywhere near 21%. I mean, that was never going to happen under the original rules. It probably would have been a couple of percent, and in some states it would have been fairly high, and a lot of states it would have been zero, which is what happened anyhow. I mean, there's a few states who still didn't really give anything to satellite, but 1 out of 5 locations, went to satellite. And it's going to be, let's see what that final percent is after California, but California gave quite a bit to satellite. So, I mean, this is dismaying on the local level. Here in North Carolina, I'm in Western North Carolina. 6 of the rural, I'm in Asheville, but around me is all rural. Western North Carolina outside of Asheville is very, very rural, very Appalachian, very hard place to bring broadband. 6 of the counties very close to me, 100% of their awards went to satellite. So they're not getting a penny of infrastructure out of BEAD, and they're not going to be happy about that. Again, if I told you earlier, states got very involved in the MAP challenge process. They've been very involved working with ISPs to give them, letters of approval to apply for the BEAD. The original BEAD rules actually gave a lot of power to local governments. People who got local letters of approval actually got more points in the grant award process. The counties for the first time felt like they were being heard in that process, and that just got pulled away under the benefit of the bargain round. So the county officials here have to be going, do we even tell the public that, we've been talking for years about supporting getting fiber to these folks. Do we even tell them that they're going to get satellite? And even worse for the 6 counties around here that almost all went to Kuiper, which is now Amazon Leo. And everyone's going, is that a real company? So we're having some very heated discussions here in Western North Carolina about what the heck this all means. So here's the big winners. Now I did update. Well, actually, this has not been updated yet for California either. But you can see, as far as size of winners, Starlink and Amazon were the 2 big winners. They got, there's the 20%, and then it was, Comcast, Brightspeed. Strategic Management is an interesting group. It's a consortium of fiber overbuilders in the Midwest. So they got they're based out of, I believe, Michigan, but they're spread over 4 or 5 state area, and they went after a whole lot of it. The rest of these large guys are old telcos, except for Nextlink, who is a fixed wireless provider. Now this has been updated for California. So these are the dollar winners, and Comcast obviously cleaned up with 1.77 out of the 21 billion. There was a whole lot of debate when BEAD rules first came out, were the big guys going to play or not? Turns out they did. So the big guys took a lion's share of it, a really large chunk. Now there's some states like Montana where I don't think they won any of the big guys didn't win a penny of it. So some states, here in North Carolina, I think we gave 90% of our money to the large guys. So states differed very broadly on how they wanted to do this. But the ability to pick winners really got killed when they went to the benefit of the bargain round. Essentially, they were forced to take the lowest fiber provider as long as they were under the cost threshold. And then if there wasn't fiber, they had to give it to the somebody in the lower tier of technologies. So these companies are obviously all pretty happy about getting it. So a few more facts. These numbers have not been updated for California. There are 646,432 projects. I think I saw the list yesterday, maybe 250 more projects in California. 29 states have been approved by NTIA. Again, we don't know what that means yet. We don't know. It means they can start negotiating on contracts, but I think they still have to get over the certification hurdles before they can actually do any of it. Before California, it's $6,000 nationwide per location. California was actually a little bit lower than that, so that average will probably drop below $6,000 a hair. And then California still hasn't actually submitted to NTIA. They're not going to do that till January. And as I said, the USVI and Puerto Rico have not, and I'm not sure why. USVI may not, but they may have nothing to claim. So here's recapping some of the issues here. So this is my take on it now. My take on it is, first off, from the very beginning, NTIA took a whole lot more control than everybody hoped that they would. This was originally touted as NTIA hands out the money and states go take their own path to pick the people who make the most sense for them. It turns out that long before this year, NTIA put their thumb on it, and they were really regimenting the rules a lot more than anybody ever hoped they would. Next thing is, it just took forever to get this going. The big issue we can blame it on is the FCC maps, but every one of those steps, I mean, it took a year before they even really issued the rules on what was going to come next. It was just a very slow process. It would have not been inconceivable for most of the money to have been given out under the old rules last year. So it's unfortunate that did not happen. The map challenge process was quite honestly a disaster. It was very good at removing locations from BEAD, and it was really hard to put locations in that belong there. And so the whole BEAD process started with 14 million locations. By the time these were awarded, it's about 4 million plus locations. So 10 million locations dropped out. Now, some of those were legitimate because some of those had gotten state broadband grants to build fiber, that sort of thing. So those definitely needed to be eliminated. But an awful lot of those should not have been eliminated. I'm still estimating, this is my own personal estimate, that there's 6 or 7 million locations that are still not going to have broadband after all this falls out. Unless they say satellite is broadband, then that means everybody has broadband. But there's a whole lot of folks. The main pile of those people are people who were taken off of the list because some wireless provider said that they were delivering 100 by 20, when in real life they were delivering 20 megabits. So there's a whole lot of that in the Midwest, for example. Almost all of southern Minnesota was eliminated from BEAD, even though the folks there can't buy 100 by 20 broadband. So that's the places that I think are still missing. Again, complete shift to rules with benefit of bargain. Not only that, but states were all of a sudden having to figure all this out in amazingly short periods of time. And so a second round with the cost caps to take even more money away. A lot of people are now looking close at the winners and going, there's an awful lot of new ISPs on here, and there's an awful lot of VC-backed firms. These are not the kind of people that states would have normally given money to. But this almost turned into RDOF, which I don't want to spend a half an hour explaining that. But that was grants given out by whoever. It was an auction. Whoever bid the least amount of money win. This almost started to feel like that. So the fiber provider who asked for the least amount of fiber money kind of won. So it almost turned into an auction. It wasn't an auction because it was one round. You never knew what the other guys bid, but. There's still a lot tougher contract rules to go through with winners, and a lot of folks, especially the smaller guys, may look at those contracts and decide that they really can't sign them after all. Which is not on here, we still have the states having to do those certifications. And then the giant question now, which is the $20 billion question, is will the states get any of that non-deployment funds that was promised by Congress? And if they do, then I just have to ask the policy question of why didn't we just spend a lot more of it on infrastructure if they're going to get it anyhow? So, but so that's why I'm pretty sure they're not going to get it. So, but that's just my personal opinion on it. So, so there's who I am. So as always, feel free to read my daily blog, Pots and Pans by CCG, where this is all I talk about. Even though I really hope that pretty soon I don't do any more blogs on BEAD. I'm kind of tired of writing about this topic, so I know Kevin is on this call. He's probably tired of hearing about it too. So this has been a long, long road. This is 4 years of it's moving into our 5th year, and we're still not there yet. So I know that Don's probably going to open up the floor to questions and discussions here, I would guess. So.
Yeah, infrastructure. I mean, it is such a challenge to do. And it's surprising, it's not surprising, but it's, I guess, alarming, the idea of handing over funds to states and giving states responsibility to work out the best policy in their states, which has a long tradition in this country, got superseded by, well, no, there's a common rational approach to this, or I don't know if you call it rational, but there's a common approach, and we're dictating what it's going to be, and it's just balling things up tremendously.
Well, let me address that real quick because I should have mentioned this. We actually found out how that works because there was a program called the Capital Projects Fund where the money just went straight to states, almost no rules. I mean, there were some rules like, it has to go to broadband infrastructure. There were some rules, but they were really light. And the states pretty much decided who to give the money to, and it went quickly. And those grants went the heck out the door, and it was all done in about 2 years. And that includes the first 6 or 8 months to cook up the paperwork, right? So those grants went very smoothly. And so we trusted the states with, I don't remember, Kevin, I think it was 10 billion, but it might have been more than that. It was a lot of money. And so it went the heck out the door. We could have done the same thing with this, and it would have been these projects would be half built by now. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And there's no reason to intervene in that process. And if the states misspend it, well, then they just misspend it. But that's their basically. I just wanted to thank Bob for giving us a Wisconsin update, similar to the breakdown that you were giving on fiber, LEO, and fixed wireless. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Kevin, for weighing in on a number of these topics. Would you like to kind of respond, ask Doug anything, or just make any kind of statements on behalf of your work at Benton and around this? You've spent a lot of time on this yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Doug really hit all the major points and very well, too. To your point, though, Don, about how tough infrastructure is. I mean, this is investments that we're making that will last in these communities for decades. At least they should. And I think that sort of points us to why NTIA was trying to be so careful. BEAD had different goals than the Capital Projects Fund did. The Capital Projects Fund was really a COVID program that was supposed to be delivering new infrastructure as quickly as possible. That's not what BEAD was after. BEAD was solve the access part of the digital divide to make sure every single unserved or underserved location has high-speed, affordable internet for decades to come. And so I understand politically why people now say, hey, this took too long, but I'm not sure that NTIA was ever really making this process go slower than it should have. As we said, we had to get quality maps first. We're still not sure that the maps are high quality. So in some ways we rushed there. And I don't know. What I'm more concerned about is when Doug says we might end up with millions of locations still unserved at the end of this. That's a tragedy, really, because we had the resources to make it happen this time.
Yeah, We've had them for a while too. I mean, we've spent a lot of money over the years on this problem just because we abandoned universal service approach to doing it in the first place. We just let the market basically try and fail to reach the unprofitable parts of the market. So um, this money that's not going to be spent, it seems like there's absolutely a legal case for that. This money was allocated, and like so many other situations, the administration seems to have intervened in a legislative decree and said, "Well, no, we're not going to do it that way." And so people are suing and tend to be winning. We just had the news, NTIA, I'm sorry, IMLS is being fully refunded according to the law, and that those funds will flow. I don't know. I hope it's quickly because they put tremendous stress on the state libraries in particular. I see Tom is with us, Tom Rolfus, an old friend, now at NTIA. Tom, you have anything you'd like to say on behalf of NTIA?
No comment.
Come on, Tom, you can do better than that.
I could,
You could.
but I won't.
Okay, well, we'll stop the recording here shortly and you can speak freely. But any other questions for Doug in the meantime? All right. Let's talk a bit about cost. The idea is to lower the cost, and so I'm curious how cost is being allocated. So the cost of satellite is low compared to fiber. I mean, like for the first week or the first year, but over time, it seems like it's as or more expensive than fiber if you amortize it over a period of 5 years or whatever. How do they accommodate that?
It's interesting because we have one of the groups on here with Kevin who they've made a strong argument that over a 30-year or longer period, the fiber's cheaper investment. They've actually published a paper or two on that topic. And it's part of just looking at the time horizon. I mean, you got to replace satellites every 5 years right now. That's not a cheap undertaking. And so there's a whole lot of speculation at the investor level that if they don't make their business plan, they just won't put as many of them back up. I mean, it's no guarantee that that's going to stay a robust network. And they don't judge their network just by BEAD in the United States. It's the whole planet. So if they don't get enough subscribers to keep themselves where they want to be, who knows if that's going to be a viable long-term business plan. There's also going to be worldwide, there's two other major satellite networks being built, one in Singapore and one by the Chinese government. A lot of people are going to use those. And so these are not the only players in town. So if those guys come out and sell it for $20 a month, that's going to really rip into the worldwide market for somebody like Starlink. So we're just going to have to see, this is a very brand new industry that has a long way to go to get mature. Interestingly, there was a paper just published by the Congressional Research Service, and they actually cited the Benton paper on the cost and about the 30-year thing. But the fact is, these fiber networks are going to last a lot more than 30 years. They're 50 to 70-year investments. That's the realistic length of fiber, and so and when you start looking at it that way, an awful lot of the places that didn't get the money, like the counties near me, fiber would have been a better solution. Again, there are still places that should have gotten satellite. There's places, I mean, I did a study for this little tiny remote community in New Mexico where they had to build $20 million of fiber just to get the backhaul to them to serve 100 people. That's not even counting the actual little bit of fiber it would take to get to their homes. So there are places that are just too remote. I mean, so satellite's a wonderful technology, and I know lots of people who use it are happy with it. So, but to give 20% of this pile of grant money to them is just puzzling. So, particularly to a company like Amazon who doesn't have any customers and they're not an ISP. Yeah.
Our position is it should not be an either or. This is a different technology, and it's a natural companion with wireline or even fixed wireless because it serves value as a backup. It also serves value as a near-term solution. So, the years yet that it will take to deploy fiber in these places will not have decent connectivity that they could have. Like tomorrow in the mail, their dish could arrive. I put one up on my house here. We're just about a few miles from the center of San Francisco. It works great. And, right now, as you say, it's hard to predict this technology. But we think it's great as an interim solution and as a backup solution. And it should not preclude fiber, which is a long-term solution. So that's our opinion on that. Let me see.
Another interesting perspective is satellite solves the problem at the homes. Fiber solves the problems in the communities. Fiber allows you to do public safety networks and connect cell phone towers and get the schools hooked up and all those kind of things that satellite's not going to take care of. So, fiber allows, if you have fiber to rural community, you can now attract businesses and, all those sort of things that, so it's a last mile solution. It's not a community solution, and is a position that I've been starting to drift towards.
I completely agree with that, unless the community loses electricity. And then you've got, right there in North Carolina. I mean, it was proven how valuable those are for the community to have a point of access. Even a tiny bit of communication in a disaster situation is super valuable. The message, "Mom, we're okay," is a tiny bit of data, but the amount of information in that is incredibly valuable.
We went 3 days in Asheville before anyone got the first text message out. Yeah. So we know exactly what that feels like.
Out, not knowing, family, friends, and how it was going on. So, like I say, it's a companion technology and should not be treated as a competing technology, except in those areas where it's just implausible to run wireline over the mountains and so forth. But fixed wireless continues to evolve really powerfully. We didn't talk about that much. We've run over a couple of minutes, but what's your sense about the evolution of fixed wireless technologies?
Fixed wireless is wonderful in places where it makes sense. I mean, in the big flat areas of the Midwest, it's not hard to put up radios that'll do 500 megabits. I mean, that's a pretty decent broadband solution. Again, that's going to have to be renewed maybe every 7 or 8 years. So are you going to pick ISPs that are going to keep making those investments? But it works. Here where I live in Appalachia, it doesn't work at all. It's just worthless here with all the hills and trees. It just doesn't work here. And no one's trying to do it here. There's almost no WISPs here in my part of the world. So if we have any WISPs here, they're building and hitting 20 homes in a little pocket, and that's all that they're trying to do. And so in those cases, it's great. But so it works where it works. Yeah. So
that's a great summary statement. It works where it works.
Yeah.
And so speaking of that, I think, Doug, we need to reschedule you for another 6 months here.
Yeah, maybe by then well next time I won't let you get me on until we actually answered those questions I left at the end.
We'll see what we know in 6 months. Hopefully we'll know more, and hopefully there will be actual deployment. I just wanted to add that we had Evan Feynman on.
Yes, that's who it was. Yes.
And Evan was the NTIA lead on this originally and dealt with all of the states and in the development of their plan. An incredible administrative accomplishment that.
It was truly herding cats. Yes, he had his job.
Yeah. So that is session number 124. You can find it on the Libraries Response YouTube channel. 124. You can see Evan's background and take on that. So we are over, and I am going to stop the recording. I'm going to thank Doug again for being so up to date, even California, which is troublesome to keep up to date with, and for his perspective on this. And we rely on that. And thank all of you for showing up. The recording should be up in a day or two. With that, I will thank you and invite you all to come back for the next time, which will be next year.